There are businesses in this country that nobody ever talks about publicly, that keep generating cash flow through recessions, through technological disruption, through every economic cycle anyone alive has ever seen. And the reason has nothing to do with the businesses themselves. It has to do with one structural characteristic that almost nobody explains clearly, and that misses the explanation, costs people real money every year they spend looking in the wrong direction. That characteristic is recurring revenue, and by the end of this video, you're going to look at every business you encounter, every investment you evaluate, and every opportunity you consider through a completely different lens than the one you're currently using. Before we go any further, one honest note. This is an educational analysis of real business models and economic structures, not investment advice, business consulting, or a promise of income. Every revenue figure and market size in this video comes from a named, attributable source, IBIS World, the Coin Laundry Association, the Self-Storage Association, the SBA, the U.S. Department of Energy, and specific research firms identified by name when cited. Every one of those figures is a benchmark, not a personal income projection, and individual results in any business depend on location, execution, capital, market conditions, and dozens of other factors that no single video can account for. Here's the principle underneath everything that follows. On the left side of this comparison, picture a business that earns only when it sells something. Every Monday morning it starts at zero. It has to find a customer, close a deal, deliver the service, collect the payment, and then begin again. On the right side, picture a business that earns because a contract, a route, a physical asset, or a deeply embedded relationship generates revenue on a schedule, regardless of whether the owner made a single sales call that week. Follow the cash flow line of each business across 5 years. Notice where the left side curve goes flat every time the owner gets sick, takes a vacation, or loses a salesperson. Notice how the right side curve keeps climbing through all of those same events. That structural difference is not just a lifestyle convenience. It is a provable, documented economic premium. Businesses with recurring contractual or behavioral revenue command higher acquisition multiples than equivalent earning transactional businesses, because a buyer purchasing future cash flow pays more when that future cash flow is predictable. Reduce the prediction risk, and you raise the price. That is the entire engine underneath everything on this list. Phase 1, the framework. The 20 businesses in this video are not 20 different things. They are 4 recurring revenue archetypes repeated across different industries. Phase 1 is route and asset revenue, where a physical asset deployed in a location earns from that location. The asset does the working. Phase 2 is contract and maintenance revenue, where a signed agreement obligates periodic service. The relationship does the working. Phase 3 is necessity-demand revenue, where the service is required so consistently that demand recurs without anyone reselling it. The problem does the working. Phase 4 is infrastructure and friction revenue, where the business becomes so embedded in another operation that switching costs make departure nearly impossible. The friction does the working. Moving through each one in sequence, the goal isn't just to recognize these businesses. It's to understand the mechanism so clearly that you can identify the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd version nobody made a video about. Phase 1, route and asset revenue. 5 businesses. 1 mechanism. Inside this first section, zoom into the laundromat. According to IBIS World's market data and figures published by the Coin Laundry Association, the U.S. laundromat industry generates roughly $7 to $7.2 billion annually, across somewhere between 17 and 18,000 operating facilities. Average per location gross revenue sits in a range from around $30,000 at the low end to $150,000 or more for well-positioned, larger operations. Now here is the number competitors almost never show because it forces them to actually explain why boring wins. The 5-year survival rate for laundromats, per industry research including Coin Laundry Association data, sits around 94 to 95%. Compare that line on the chart to the survival rate of restaurants, which research across multiple sources consistently places far lower. Notice the gap between these two curves. The laundromat's durability is not because laundry is exciting. It's because demand is structurally non-optional and competition is artificially suppressed by cultural aversion. Nobody grows up dreaming of owning a laundromat. That aversion is a competitive moat, and it belongs entirely to whoever is willing to walk past it. The real cost structure you need before you ever consider this business: utilities will consume 20 to 25% of gross revenue, equipment maintenance is real and cannot be deferred indefinitely, and the upfront capital requirement to open a new location runs from roughly $200,000 to $500,000 or more depending on equipment, lease terms, and market. For acquisition of an existing operation with an established customer base, SBA 7A financing is a real, documented path for eligible buyers. Now move to self-storage. According to figures from multiple research sources including the 2024 Self-Storage Almanac and Mordor Intelligence, the U.S. self-storage market sits around $45 billion in total value across more than 50,000 facilities. The fastest-growing customer segment is not the household between moves. According to a Mordor Intelligence survey published in January of 2026, approximately 38% of online sellers with annual revenue under $500,000 stage inventory in self-storage rather than warehouses. The self-storage facility has quietly become a layer of commercial infrastructure for small e-commerce operators, and most people who drive past one see a building for extra couches. What Public Storage REITs and Extra Space Storage report in their public filings tells a different story. Occupancy rates across major operators averaged somewhere between 88 and 94% through 2025. That is not a category in distress. Move to ATMs and vending. Inside this isolated section, zoom into the economics of a single ATM sitting in one location. The asset itself earns a transaction fee on each use. The operator earns either a placement fee, a revenue share with the location owner, or both. The product being sold is not money or snacks. It is the value of the location, which was sitting there uncaptured before the asset arrived. This is location arbitrage in its simplest form, deploying a physical asset to monetize space that was generating nothing. Parking lots operate on a similar economic logic, except that well-located parking revenue is valued more like commercial real estate than a business in the traditional sense. The cap rate framework applies directly. A lot generating consistent, predictable annual net income is priced on a multiple of that income in a way that reflects how real estate investors think about yield, not how business brokers think about owner dependency. Phase 2, Contract and Maintenance Revenue. 5 businesses. 1 mechanism. The most important idea in this entire section, and the one almost no competing content explains clearly, is the valuation premium that contracts create at the point of sale. Compare these two versions of the same cleaning company side by side. On the left, a residential cleaning company that acquires customers one booking at a time, starting from near zero each month as appointments fall off and new ones need to be filled. On the right, a commercial cleaning company holding contracts with 3 office buildings, each obligating monthly service for the next 2 or 3 years. Now price both businesses for sale at the same annual revenue. The right side sells for more, not because it cleans better or costs less to operate, but because the buyer is purchasing a predictable future cash flow stream, not a hope that customers rebook. That is the contract premium, and it is documented in business acquisition data across multiple industries. Inside this first contract business, pest control. Here's the concept that separates it from almost everything else on this list. In most businesses, the seller must persuade the buyer. The pest control operator under a commercial maintenance contract does not. The restaurant, the medical office, the food production facility, and the apartment building are required by health code, insurance mandates, and liability exposure to maintain ongoing pest control treatment. The customer seeks the vendor. That demand inversion, where the problem itself generates the appointment, is the most defensible position a service business can occupy. Bookkeeping belongs in this section for the same structural reason. A business owner does not stop needing monthly bookkeeping because the month was slow. The need is non-negotiable, it recurs on a schedule, and switching costs are real because a new bookkeeper has to rebuild familiarity with the client's books from scratch. According to Fortune Business Insights, the global accounting services market is valued at over $682 billion with continued growth projected. That is a single firm's market estimate, not a government figure, and it should be understood as one estimate among several, but the directional evidence for stable, growing demand in professional bookkeeping services is consistent across sources. Commercial window cleaning, pressure washing under maintenance contracts, and commercial cleaning all share the same structural quality. They are services that a commercial property either must perform on a regular schedule for regulatory, aesthetic, or operational reasons, or that a signed contract obligates on a recurring timeline. The key word in evaluating any of them is contract. A residential job is a transaction. A commercial contract is a cash flow stream with a predictable duration. If this framework is changing how you see the businesses you walk past every day, subscribing keeps the rest of this series in your feed, and the next video connects everything on this list to the acquisition economy that runs underneath it. Phase 3, Necessity Demand Revenue. For businesses. 1 Mechanism. You have walked past these businesses every single day without a second thought. That invisibility is the product. The businesses in this section do not need marketing because the problem they solve cannot be deferred. Inside this section, commercial kitchen plumbing. A restaurant cannot open on a day when the kitchen drain is backed up. There is no workaround, no deferral, no alternative. The contractor who specializes in commercial kitchen plumbing under a maintenance agreement is not competing for the client's attention. They are on the list of people who get called when something stops working, and in a commercial kitchen, stopping working is not an option. Recurring maintenance contracts in this category follow from the same logic as pest control. The demand inversion is even more acute. Now move to electrical, specifically the EV charging installation specialization. The U.S. Department of Energy has published data on the rapid expansion of EV adoption and the federal investment in charging infrastructure under recent infrastructure legislation. The supply-demand gap here is practical and documented. The number of certified electricians qualified to install commercial EV charging infrastructure is not keeping pace with the installation demand created by the intersection of fleet electrification mandates and consumer adoption growth. A licensed electrician who builds specialization in this installation category is positioning in the path of a structural, multi-decade deployment cycle that is driven by policy and infrastructure investment, not by consumer preference alone. Portable restrooms occupy a category most people actively avoid thinking about, which is the precise source of their economic value. The market for portable sanitation, including temporary restroom solutions for construction, events, and emergency response, is tracked by Grandview Research at over $20 billion globally. That is a paid research firm's estimate and should be attributed as such. What is not an estimate is that every active construction site above a certain scale is legally required to provide sanitary facilities, and that requirement is not optional, is not seasonal, and does not decrease during economic downturns because construction financing does not stop when consumer sentiment softens. Phase 4, Infrastructure and Friction Revenue. 5 businesses. The highest valuations on the entire list. Here's why. Notice what happens to the acquisition multiple as you move from left to right across these 4 archetypes. Route and asset revenue earns a premium over transactional businesses. Contract and maintenance revenue earns a higher premium still, because contracts reduce prediction risk further. Necessity demand revenue commands strong multiples because demand is structurally guaranteed. But infrastructure and friction revenue sits at the top of the valuation curve, because once a business is embedded deeply enough into another business's daily operations, the customer cannot leave without rebuilding something they have already built. Switching costs are the most durable competitive moat in business, and they are structural, not dependent on the quality of any product. Inside this first container, SMB software. A small business owner who has spent 2 years building workflows, training staff, and storing client data inside a specific piece of software is not evaluating that software monthly. The friction of leaving is so high that the recurring subscription payment becomes nearly invisible. This is the recurring revenue model with switching costs layered on top of it, which is why software businesses, particularly those serving small businesses with high operational integration, command the highest acquisition multiples in the entire business acquisition universe. Custom parts manufacturing for a specific industry client base occupies a similar structural position. A manufacturer producing a component that integrates directly into another company's product line, built to specification, with tooling and process knowledge embedded in the supplier relationship, does not face quarterly competition from new entrants. The barrier to replacement is technical and operational. On the acquisition side of this archetype, citing Walker Deibel's framework from his book Buy Then Build, which is a named, citable resource in the searcher and small business acquisition community, the central argument is that buying an existing business with proven recurring revenue starts the buyer above zero, already inside a cash flow stream, rather than spending years building toward the same outcome with maximum execution risk at the front. An existing business with established customers, trained employees, and verifiable recurring revenue is not more expensive than starting from scratch when you account for the time value of the years required to build what the acquisition delivers immediately. Franchises belong here for the same reason. The infrastructure in a franchise is the proven operating system, the training infrastructure, the supply chain relationships, and the brand recognition that would take years to build independently. Average annual revenue per franchise location varies enormously by brand, territory, and operator, and any single figure used here should be understood as illustrative of category performance rather than a promise for any specific franchise. The structural value is the system itself, not any single revenue benchmark. Sports card grading, as a business rather than a speculation, belongs in this section precisely because it illustrates a principle worth understanding. A business built on a repeatable, certifiable process, where the output is a graded, authenticated, standardized product, earns recurring revenue not from sales of the underlying asset, but from fees charged to certify and authenticate it. The collectibles authentication space is a real, growing category, and the business model, charging a processing fee for a service that a market demands, is structurally similar to the infrastructure revenue logic applied across the rest of this section. Here is a 4-question filter to run against any business you encounter from today forward. Question 1, inside this first box, does it pay me once or every period? A single transaction creates a single revenue event. A contract, a route, a subscription, or a recurring service relationship creates a revenue stream. The difference in how these two answers translate into acquisition valuation is the entire thesis of this video. Question 2, inside the second box, does the customer have to redecide to use me, or does the revenue continue by default? A customer who has to actively choose you every month is always one bad experience away from leaving. A customer who continues using you because stopping requires effort is structurally retained. The question is whether your revenue is opt-in or opt-out. Question 3, inside the third box, what is the ugliness premium? How many people refuse to do this business, and what does that refusal do to the level of competition you face? The businesses that survive at the highest rates and sell at the best multiples are often the ones nobody chose because they didn't match anyone's identity aspirations. The pest control route and the portable restroom fleet do not compete in a crowded market of people who wanted to own them. That aversion is worth real money to the person willing to walk past it. Question 4, inside the fourth box. What would this business be worth if you wanted to sell it? This question changes how you evaluate everything. A transactional business generating $50,000 in net income might sell at 2 to 3 times that figure if anything. The same $50,000 inside a contracted, recurring revenue structure might sell at 4 to 6 times. The valuation multiple at exit is built or destroyed at the moment you choose the business model, not the moment you decide to sell. The 20 businesses in this video are 20 instances of 4 archetypes. The viewer who understands the archetype sees the 21st opportunity without needing a list. These are not just businesses to start. They are assets to buy. There is an entire economy built around acquiring exactly these businesses, quietly, with government-backed financing, and stacking them into something far larger than any single location would ever produce alone. That is the next conversation.